Welcome to the M&A Unplugged podcast. Our mission is to help you be better prepared for your business acquisition or sale. Being prepared will ensure you maximize returns and minimize risks. This is M&A Unplugged with your host, Domenic Rinaldi.
Welcome back. I'm Domenic Rinaldi, host of the M&A Unplugged podcast. So if you've just acquired a business and you have all these great ideas to transform and grow the business immediately, our guest today, Jen Goldman of Jen Goldman Consulting, would tell you to stop and start by doing nothing other than developing what she calls a simmer pot. What's a simmer pot? Simply, it's a list of observations about how the business operates inside and out. From there, you can start to develop a roadmap for changes and which tasks should get priority status. Seems simple enough, but it's so hard to do as a new business owner. You're required to take a back seat and really take time to assess a business when you've got all this energy and excitement about owning this new business or integrating it into your existing business. This is a critical stage because up until now, and up until the time that you acquire a business, all of your diligence work has been from afar. This is the first opportunity to really get a look under the covers of the business and see what's truly happening. Jen also shares her IDEOS framework, which will help you identify areas in the business to potentially integrate things like processes and tasks or functions, delegate things that maybe the previous owner was doing that you shouldn't be doing, or you've had managers or executives doing that really their people should be doing, so you can free them up. The opportunity to eliminate things that are not really adding value to the business. Perhaps it's an opportunity to outsource some functions. You need some real expertise and you don't have it in-house, and perhaps outsourcing might make the most sense. And it's also an opportunity to look at your staff and maybe recalibrate what's happening with the staff. So if you're thinking about buying a business or growing your existing business through acquisition, you will definitely want to listen to this episode with Jen Goldman. But before we get into today's episode, if you want to avoid common deal pitfalls and the risk of losing substantial dollars, you need to know how ready you really are to buy a business. Because I believe proper preparation is so critical to your deal success, we have published several free resources to help you be better prepared. You can access these resources on our website at k2advisor.com/resources. Being prepared is critical to ensuring that you maximize returns and minimize risks. Thank you for being here and hope you enjoyed today's episode. Jen, welcome to M&A Unplugged. It's so nice to have you here today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
We're going to talk a bit today about what new business owners should be thinking about when they first acquire and take over a business, and maybe even unpack some of the things operationally they can think about in diligence. And this is, really important topic. But before we dive in, how about a little bit of background on yourself and a quick bio?
Sure. Born and bred in Buffalo, New York, and a daughter of educators who actually had entrepreneurial blood, and left Buffalo for Boston, Massachusetts in my early 20s. And from there, jumped around a couple companies, worked with venture capitalists, worked in businesses, small and large, and now I'm a consultant to micro and small businesses.
Awesome. So you've been at all levels of the spectrum in the business world, and I know you've been doing this for quite some time and very successful. And right now, in the environment that we're in, lots of folks are finding themselves dislocated, furloughed, laid off, or their compensation has changed considerably, and acquiring a business has become, a real possibility for a lot of these folks. Maybe not one that they wanted to, pursue immediately, but they're being forced to do it. And And so for new business owners, and I know you've had the opportunity to work with a couple of folks who acquired a business and help them really get their arms around it, really want to dive into what should new business owners be thinking about when they first acquire a business, because you've got this, you've got all of these things that you can do and you have all this energy and you want to do everything, but
Right.
where do you start?
Yeah. So I use words or letters. So I call it the PPPG, and I'm sure you've heard of this. But there's 4 areas. I focus on the people, we focus on productivity, profitability, and growth. So trying to keep that 3 P's and a G, as I
Yeah.
say, organized. And when I mean people, I mean 2 sets of people. I mean the people that come with the business, because you might inherit employees or contractors, and the customers that come with the business. So I just want to be clear. You want to understand what you will be inheriting in terms of culture, mood, style, expectations, uh, you know, compensation, right? That's important. Productivity, you want to know the tech stack. What are you going to be inheriting? What's working, what's not working, and how are people able to focus on the highest value types of efforts in the business? On the profitability, that's just looking at P&Ls. It's looking at balance sheets and understanding, again, what you're inheriting, and look for patterns. It's really important to kind of see like past revenue, growth and dips, and also on expenses. And then on growth, what are you inheriting in terms of online presence and the cyclical nature of growth, right? Some businesses have those ups and downs throughout a given year, pre-COVID, of course. And you got to know what you're getting into and when you're buying in on terms
Yeah.
of growth.
So I have a suspicion here, and I want to see if I'm right about this. When I work with people who are looking to buy a business, they do a lot of due diligence, right?
Mm.
But it's in a pretty condensed period of time. I mean, it might be over a 90, 120-day period, and it's from a distance, right?
Yeah.
So they're not in the business diving in diligence. They're gathering information. They're talking to the owner, maybe some key players, and doing some research on the market. And they buy the business and they walk in day one and they've got these preconceived notions about the business and about how it operates and the opportunities. But should people act on that immediately, or what should they do to maybe validate what they learned? How should people approach what they've learned in diligence when they first take over?
Yeah, it's almost like you had a couple questions there, so I'll try to answer at least the first is, you don't want to act right away, and that's hard because you walk in with all this energy and enthusiasm, and you already have a vision in your head as an owner and a leader. So I actually believe in, I have names for everything called the simmer pot.
Uh-huh.
Everything that comes to mind, things that you want to do, things that you see, areas that need attention. I actually believe in fully documenting that into like a living, breathing document. I use a project management software for this with businesses and just start brain dumping, because as the minute you start doing that, you will naturally prioritize. And that's then, sometimes the priorities are based on pain points around people, right? And that's always creates a culture, could be a culture issue. So that might rise to the top in terms of priority scheme. But yeah, I would never say on day number 1 or day number 5 to just jump in and start doing it. I mean, unless something's super obvious, you have the whole team's buy-in and they've been waiting for it and it's a quick, easy, cheap win, then go for it. But other than that, start throwing everything in the simmer pot.
So it's human nature to come in and want to move the needle and improve things, right?
Sure.
Is there a recommended time frame people should use this simmer pot? First time I've ever heard the simmer pot analogy. But is
Yeah.
there a period of time that you recommend? And are there questions and things that people should be doing during that time frame that can really make a big difference?
I usually say 15 days
Hmm.
for things to simmer.
Hmm.
Again, unless there's some major burning issue that you coming in, right away has to be taken care of. Okay, but almost always, as I say, unless you're doing heart surgery, there's no one's going to die. You've got to take that 15 days.
Hmm.
Um, I guess from there, and in those 15 days, what I always recommend is getting clear understanding of roles and responsibilities. I got to be honest, when you're inheriting a business, more often than not, you're inheriting people with it. And everybody wants to know where they stand and where you stand. So if you're that owner, you got to be pretty clear about what your roles and responsibilities are going to be and what theirs are. And I don't believe in dumping this all on the buyer. I believe that everyone on the team should pitch in and cross communicate. So it's a one-page exercise of writing out roles, responsibilities, and even your own, employee goals and owner goals. That's a big one. The other one I would do in the first 15 days, is clearly understanding how everybody's operating. And how do you do that visually and quickly? I believe in tech mapping and tech data flows. I think tech is integral in any business, doesn't matter what it is. So understanding who's doing what and who's leaning on the technology to do what. And if you can get that done in the first 15 days, that's pretty spectacular. It's pretty, and
So
it'll make a clear path.
Between the simmer pot and the tech mapping, you're going to have, as an owner, you're probably going to have pages of notes, right? And now you've got to distill down, where do you go focus? What moves the needle the most? Yeah. In your experience, are there 2 or 3 things in a business where you really can move the needle pretty quickly and pretty substantially? That maybe people don't think about on a day in, day out basis?
Well, I find the roles and responsibilities is a mind-blowing exercise. I mean, the amount of empowerment that comes out of that, the amount of people that step up and help to move the business forward and up, it's phenomenal, because they really want their leader to tell them what to do. But by doing that, it kind of opens the game for high capacity, high productivity, high collaboration. At least that's what I've always found, especially with smaller businesses that, where everybody's talking often and a lot. Yeah. So I'm going to say to you, going back, that's what I see as being the biggest win.
Can you give us an example of that, where you worked with somebody on the roles and responsibilities, and what did that look like? And then what was the outcome of that exercise?
Sure. So first of all, everything that I do is one page. So when you talk about pages of documents, I don't believe in that. So I believe in role charting, which is literally, if you could visualize this, think of like an Excel spreadsheet and tiles. And in each tile, it lists an area of the business and then the decision maker for that area. So it's very clear, and then who's the doer. So it's very, very clear on one page. By doing that exercise, again, it frees up people underneath the owner and the leader to do and not worry about being penalized for doing or taking something forward and moving it to the finish line. People are afraid when a new buyer comes in that they might step over the line, that they might do something that the buyer didn't want them to do. But the minute you clarify in the role chart who's the decision maker for each area of the business, and the buyer says, listen, you go with this, you've been doing this and I'm good for you to run, and it's documented, that gives the freedom for people to really run with ideas and initiatives that they were doing before the buyer came in. So again, in the story, I will tell you this, the buyer, in this instance of my story, felt very freed up from the beginning to really focus on the vision of the business. They didn't come in feeling like they had to dig deep into marketing and deep into operations and all the other areas, because as soon as they did this exercise, they realized their people had it. They're new people, and that they could focus on the vision and the growth. And that allowed for, to be honest, 32% growth in the first year. It was like a massive kick up. Yeah. And this was a business that had rolling revenues of, going back on memory, about 1.5 million of reoccurring revenue. So that was a big boost. And usually when a buyer comes in, it's kind of getting settled in, and you don't see that in the first year. And it wasn't that difficult to do, because again, that buyer was freed up immediately by knowing the roles and responsibilities and who was taking lead and who was allowed to do their thing, which is to vision the company forward.
Well, I have to tell you, I'm a little blown away. I would have never thought the answer to the question I was asking would be roles and responsibilities. I think I would have naturally thought we were going to go to marketing or
Sure.
technology or
Yeah.
productivity or lots of other places, but roles and responsibilities. And it seems so basic,
That's right.
but something that you could easily overlook. Uh, but it also follows a theme, a common theme that we talk about a lot with owners of businesses, which is if you want to improve the value of your business, one of the key ways to do that is to remove yourself from a lot of the pieces of the business so that you could really focus on working on the business and not in the business. And I
Yes.
think it sort of goes hand in hand with the roles and responsibilities.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
I think we undersell the idea of the empowerment of the people. And what I have seen over and over in a business is that when the people in the house, in the business, feel clear about their purpose and what they're doing, that actually oozes out into the community. So whether you're a community, regional, or national business or international, there's no question that if you feel as an employee, whatever level, empowered and in control and doing well, it goes across the phone line. It goes across the video line. It comes out in the outward communication. And no, I got to be honest, most businesses don't believe me. They just don't believe me unless they've been through it before, right? The owners and the buyers don't believe it. And then when that happens, they're like, oh my God, I just brought in X business. How did that happen? And I'm like, I don't know what to
But
tell you.
if you
It's
go back to
magic.
your early career, you and for myself, when I think about the positions I held early in my career, when I was empowered, it was both scary but really exciting. Somebody
Yes.
was giving you the opportunity to go make something happen. And it's a bit scary because, you're worried that you're going to mess it up and all the things that could happen. But at the same time, it's really exciting. It frees you up to go, express yourself.
Yeah,
It's awesome.
exactly.
So let's talk about owners. I know that one of the things that you do a lot of is that you'll work with owners on operations techniques to really free them up from, being overloaded on a day in, day out basis. And it sounds like roles and responsibilities is clearly one of those. But what other things can an owner do to really free themselves up and in the process probably build a lot of value in the business and self-satisfaction?
Yeah. You know, and I was just working on this morning. Good timing. I think that owners have trouble saying no sometimes.
Mhm.
So this concept of, Greg McGowan's essentialism, the idea of time blocking, I actually suggest that an owner brings it one step further and they put in a call scheduling system into play because it holds them accountable to where their focus should be.
Mm.
So, we can talk all we want about focus and blocking and habits, but sometimes we need a little help forming those habits or holding us accountable. So to me, the scheduling system has been something that I've literally put in for every single business and owner, regardless of the type of business that they're in.
So can you talk a little bit more about that? What exactly is it?
So it's a system like you and I both use, right? The concept that somebody can click on a link, like let's say it's a call button on a website, and the
Mm.
big banks have these now, and big institutions, everybody, it feels like almost everyone does. But it's the idea that when somebody books a call with you as the owner, they're given choices of days and times.
Mm.
Behind the scenes, the beauty is that those are blocks that you put into play to
Mhm.
limit how many calls you would take during the day or on what days.
Mhm.
So this whole concept of being available 24/7, I'm not a fan. I
Mhm.
don't think it leaves time for the owner to really work on the business and bring it forward and up. And so this is how we do it behind the
Yeah.
scenes.
I do use that, and it is amazing. It frees me up, and it also gives people plenty of options. If they want to reach me, they can, but
Yes.
I have my protected times, which I need to
Yeah.
operate my business and think about it.
Yeah.
Um, awesome. So we've talked a lot about what business owners should be thinking about when they first take over a business. I want to switch over to before they acquire a business. From an operations perspective, are there techniques or things or advice that you would offer to prospective buyers on how they should assess the operations of a business? Because they can't touch it and feel it. They can't really develop a simmer list because they're not in the business. So they're assessing it from afar. What advice would you offer to buyers who are in that situation in diligence?
Well, first I'd tell them to be a buyer of the product or service if they could. I mean, ideally, let's talk about the client experience, a customer experience, but also more importantly, what process they're put through. Because one of the things I think that's so important inside of a good, healthy, lean business is processes. So how else do you uncover that, without them knowing that's what you're trying to do?
Right.
Yeah. So be the customer or the client, if you could be, is one area to assess. I mean, you and I both know if you're in the dance of looking at business, the P&Ls, the balance sheets, looking for patterns and, anomalies, that's really important. Another is obviously experiencing the people. I mean, again, I know I'm going back to that, but you've got to know the people in the house that you might be inheriting. So finding ways to have casual conversations with them. This is difficult in COVID, but let's say this podcast goes on forever, right? We get out of this phase. It's a matter of meeting with as many people in the business as you can.
Yeah. Which is a difficult thing because many owners that are looking to sell their business don't want a buyer interacting with their employees, right? And so that's a bit tricky. But there are ways around that. We have seen in some cases where it was, there's a substantial operation, maybe a third party is retained to do an employee satisfaction survey. And nobody knows that it's the buyer that's doing it. It looks like the owner of the business is doing it, but really it's for the buyer's benefit. And it's a good way to, assess, what's happening with the employee base and are they happy? And are there issues that are potentially there that are going to need to be addressed? Or are there material issues that maybe would cause you to walk away from that particular opportunity?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Other things that you could think of, from an operational perspective that people could do, before they pull the trigger on buying a particular business?
Well, it's almost no different than me being a consultant and looking at a business that wants to work with me. I mean, I am looking through their online presence to their tech stack. So there are so many things that you can, and maybe I'm biased, that you can see about their infrastructure that's actually online. Yeah. So, I could take any business, but, again, what are they going to give the customers if somebody becomes a customer? What's the portal technology? What is the website technology? What do they look like on social media? That's a sign of their internal tech as well and their use of tech. So I think, you can get a general sense of that. You're certainly not going to get all the tech that they don't use, but they pay for. That's a surprise that waits for you after you buy. And I at that point, honestly, I really feel like you've covered it. Again, I go back to the 3 Ps and a G. I mean, between the P&Ls, the people, the customer, what you see on the outside, the process, trying to go through the client experience, I think you're going to get a general sense of the health of the business. Yeah,
that's great. I want to go back to the client experience because it's not possible for you to have a client experience with every particular type of business. I mean, you might be looking at a manufacturing business and you can't feasibly, buy or even engage in what they're manufacturing. But just like I mentioned earlier, with employees, you can do employee satisfaction surveys. You can also do client satisfaction surveys.
That's right.
That are masked. So it doesn't, nobody needs to know that you're the prospective buyer. It's just the existing company doing a third-party validation. We just had this happen on 2 deals that we closed last quarter, and the buyer retained third parties. The seller of the business in each case had the ability to interview and approve the third party that was being hired, and control the environment. So what questions were going to be asked, so on and so forth. And they got to approval. In one case, it required some negotiation because the buyer wanted to ask some questions that the seller was not comfortable with. But in both cases, they got there. But they did the surveys, and they were great. It turned out in both cases that clients were generally very happy. They identified some areas of improvement. And I tell people all the time, that's great. Yes. You want a business with some warts, right? You want a business that has areas for improvement. If not, where are you going to take the business? How are you going to grow it? And by the way, in all my years of doing this, I've never seen a perfect business. Have you?
No. Nope.
Yeah. And so the only question is, are the warts and are the issues material? And if they are, then maybe you need to think twice about that business. But if they're not material, there's your opportunity for growth. There's your roadmap. There's your simmer list, right? Your simmer. So,
it's interesting, and I listen to you talk. It's like references. The beauty of businesses these days, to be honest, is they tout who their client base is. So when you look like a top 500 or a 1,000, right? They're the logos of the companies they work with are on there. So there's nothing stopping you as a buyer from calling those companies and saying, "How has been your experience working with this company?" You have every right. It's public information, so you're allowed to ask. Yeah. So you're right. You can go as systematic as you're mentioning, but you can go also as simply as just reaching out to those companies and seeing what their experience was with the company you might buy. I mean, there's, again, common sense, but it all takes time.
Yes, without a doubt.
That's right.
So Jen, this has been great. Let me give you the opportunity, though, if we missed anything in the discussion here, to bring up some other thoughts or high-level things that prospective buyers should be thinking about, either when they're looking to buy or they've acquired and they're trying to integrate and transition into the business.
Yeah, the only thing that I would mention is that once a buyer is in the business, there is a mantra that I follow that I like sharing, because again, I'm into the letters and remembering. It's called IDEOS, and it's spelled properly, IDEOS. And this mantra is something that I've used, for my 30 years. And what it stands for is, when you look at an area of the business, you think about ways to integrate, delegate, eliminate, outsource, or staff recalibrate. So every time I'm looking with a buyer at a business, or we're already into the business, what I'm looking for is ways, again, I'll go over this, to integrate, delegate, eliminate, outsource, or staff recalibrate around that area of the business. And when you apply this, you constantly identify lean techniques, ways to reduce work, increase productivity, profitability. So I just want to share that, because I always took it for granted. That's how my brain thought. And when I can articulate it, I find it's an easy one to follow. It's very helpful.
Wow, that's a great way to think about it. And just to hone in on, well, I think we kind of hit on delegate when we talked about roles and responsibilities and getting it. But that middle one, that eliminate, that, in my experience, is one of the hardest things for people to do. And by the way, I'm guilty. There were many years where there was a particular piece of our business that I just couldn't pull myself away from. There was a block. And I went to a seminar, and it clicked for me. Mm-hmm. And we eliminated what we were doing almost immediately. And I will tell you, we grew 20% because of it, almost overnight. Yeah. And I was in my own way. And I'm sure you see that.
Yeah, that's why they work with us, right? I mean, in the end, it's hard to see. I've had a coach my whole life to kind of clear the deck and to call me out on what is essential, what's really needed and not. So, because that simmer pot can get out of control. And, you always need, I would say this too, you always need an outside party that's not afraid to tell you the truth, that is not afraid. So that could be a mentor, a business friend, someone with gray hair that you trust. Whatever the case is, that's so important. The owners that stand alone will not survive. They won't survive. I don't see them surviving. So, That
Well,
being
and look no further than sports or the arts and actors or, whatever. All of them, all those cultures have coaches, right? They all do, and mentors. And as business owners, why should we think we're any different? We need that recalibration. It really, really helps. Well, Jen, that's great. This is awesome stuff. If folks in the M&A Unplugged community wanted to get in touch with you, how could they reach you?
They could just pull up Jen Goldman Consulting and I'll show up the ranking. Nice and easy.
That's great. Well, thank you again for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. All of today's information will be available in the show notes. If you enjoy our content, please remember to subscribe and review our podcast. I look forward to seeing you again on the next episode of the M&A Unplugged podcast. And until then, please remember that scaling, acquiring, or selling a business takes time, preparation, and the proper knowledge.